Yeah. Good sport, I've been good sport, finding good sport.
On the Good Sport, we are so fortunate to be joined by an absolute badass go-getter, a music producer, DJ, motorsport racer, enthusiast, and a present-day podcast host on the topic of motorsport, music, and business with her show Mission Makers. Farah is a journalist, a TEDx speaker who has interviewed the likes of Deepak Chopra, and is a curator for IMS Ibiza. Last but not least, she is the founder of Regents Racing, an exclusive automotive community, club, and company based in London, exploring the psychology of racing and how it builds inspirational leaders. Farah Nanji, aka DJ Ninja, welcome to the Good Sport, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been, wow, a very, very fun 2 days since we met. 2 days ago, I just feel the need to give some context. This is your last day in Joburg, and so...
Yeah, I had to think about that for a minute. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Not ready to leave.
Honestly, I'm so appreciative of you making time and a real effort to be here. You've been here for so little time, and I'm such a big believer of chance encounters, and it certainly felt like the moment that we met that like this was crazy in terms of alignment. And I think there's like an assumption with chance encounters that they are coincidental and accidental, but so much of my life's trajectory has been through these moments that have ended up, it changes your life thereafter. And so I really, really appreciate it. And, as women in music with a deep passion for sports and podcasting, it just felt so crazy meant to be here with you. So I appreciate it a lot that you're here.
Thank you. No, it felt like the stars aligned. It was really cool to meet you. And as we kept talking, we just kept finding out so much more that we have in common, which was incredible. Like literally to the very end of our conversation. So I absolutely loved it. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be here in South Africa.
Yes, for your first time ever. It's really exciting to have you be a part of the Good Sport. And yeah, going back to like the whole notion of chance encounters, I think that there's something about like the butterfly effect of, our getting to see like people's life stories, the ripple effect of small decisions that inevitably end up opening the biggest doors to our life path. So you've mentioned your grandfather's love for, motorsports, being a petrol head and the Sunday ritual of Formula One.
Did your research, I can tell, in a very short space of time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So talk about your love story with motorsport.
Yeah, so I was, really lucky to grow up in Britain, where we have a huge history with motorsport and the automotive industry. And I think if I literally go back to my earliest, encounter with the engine, I mean, it goes back to my mum, who would say that, to get you to go to sleep, you would always insist on like going for a drive around the block, right? And something about the engine being really soothing, and my poor mother and father would have to drive me around the block because I just didn't want to go to sleep. And so I find, that probably is an interesting kind of like early insight into how that I found some sort of tranquility in the car. And then I think my mum was I was about 3 years old when my mum was pregnant with my sister. And she always tells us this story about how one day she was going to get the groceries, and we were getting in the car, and she was like loading the groceries in the car, and she's like 9 months pregnant at this point, and I've suddenly reached over to the other side of the car, and I've basically started to try and drive the car, and she literally had to stop me like with like like from the front bonnet, because she wasn't inside the car at that time.
Of course, she was loading the groceries.
She was like loading the groceries. So I obviously just had some sort of draw to cars, and then fast forward, yes, my grandfather, he'd passed away when I was 7, but my memories of him was that he did have, this absolute love for cars, and Sunday we would go driving rooftop down if the weather would allow in Britain on one day of the year. But Sundays are for driving. Like it's so nice just to kind of hit the open road, go somewhere, talk to your co-pilot, and of course Sundays are also F1, so that's like a ritual in my house. tomorrow is actually the end of the championship. By the time this airs, we will already know who wins the championship.
Oh my God.
Max already won, but is it going to be Ferrari or McLaren? We don't know. But yeah, and then got into a go-kart when I was really young, and it changed my life. And I think if you've ever been in a go-kart and you like speed and adrenaline and cars, like, you'll never forget your first time. And it was just an absolutely out of mind body experience.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm sure the story of your mom loading the groceries is, like you said, a repetitive thing, especially because of like how big of a role it ended up playing in your life's path and your passion. Like, I think we're so lucky. Not everyone is like this, that they get to really have a feeling of what they're drawn to at such a young age. I feel the same about music, and also have a fond memory that I think I was telling you about, my grandmother watching football, and that's what drew me into the sport.
Nice.
And with sports, I've really noticed that there's always a person, and it's typically in the family, that opens that door for us of like just peeking through, and the interest, whether it's just its presence, the sound of it playing at home, it draws you in. And clearly you you don't worry about a 3-year-old reaching for the wheel, but you never know what your children are going to be passionate about.
Exactly.
And it's time and place, right? Like you said, being from Britain, like it also exposed you to the culture of this, like Sundays for driving. And I think that that's so beautiful. And it's very relevant to the path that you've carved for yourself. Obviously, you're a musical artist, and it's so crazy. I don't know how this has happened, Farah, but you are the 4th DJ in 11 episodes that we've had on.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know if it speaks to the commonality and like this intersection between sports and DJing, or also my interest in where it's peaking, and my curation, which obviously plays a part in who makes it here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, vibe attracts your tribe, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm in great company then, and I'm honored by that. When it comes to the topic of first guests, I went back to listen to your very first interview, with Rosanna Tennant, and her philosophy and life story really resonated with me, and it made me think about my own first guests. Both of our first and second Good Sports were people who in part inspired the existence of the podcast for me as like my idealistic, like, how do you say, they were like my sort of my proof of concept in my mind before the podcast even existed. I had an idea of why I wanted them and why it made sense for the podcast to exist. How did you end up choosing Rosanna, and what inspired you to make her your first mission maker?
For sure. No, that's a great question. I've never been asked that before. So, you like. I think season 1 for the show, it almost is a proof of concept, because you need to use your network as much as possible to have the right guests on the show, right? I mean, and I was lucky. I've been lucky because I've really cultivated and nurtured my network over decades. So I know some extraordinary people, and season 1 is a testament of that. I mean, I think the second guest was Tessie de Nassau, who's like a UN/AIDS ambassador. She's been voted Woman of the Decade. She was like the first woman. She was the only woman in 500 men in the military. Proud to call her my best friend as well, and I'm the godmother to her children. But we have an incredible business friendship as well. And so you think about your first 3 guests, and yes, Rosanna as well, in that, and you think about women or people, especially Rosanna, like, she's blazing a lot of trails in the motorsport industry as this presenter in Formula One, a very male-dominated world. And I think the way that she tells the stories about F1 is so captivating. So I think I didn't really maybe go too deep into the, like, should it be the X, Y, and Z out of those 3, but I knew who I wanted my first 3 to be, because it was like definitely a powerful statement. Like, these are the kinds of people we want to talk to. They are changing the game in their respective industries, and we want to find out how they did that and why they're doing it, and what drives them.
It was an excellent choice, and it really, I think, drove your mission statement home from that first one. I told you the day that we met on the drive home, I was listening to your latest episode with Bianca Senna?
Yeah, Bianca Senna, yeah.
And it all made sense. I feel like the evolution is clear, obviously, but also there's a certain familiarity, and the standard seems very consistent. And Rosanna's story was, and just the way that she interacts with her story was really beautiful and drew me in instantly. And I guess it's like you're the first podcaster, Good Sport, that we've had on. So the first person I have the real opportunity of, asking that question of what's the inspiration like there. Yeah.
It's funny you say, because I now look back to season 1 and I look back and I think, you say consistency and I'm like, oh my God, the level of little prep that I did compared to what I do now in terms of like how I approach my interviews, and obviously now can get a film crew down and all that stuff, because back then it was much more homegrown. Like, it was the pandemic as well, to be fair, so like, yes, you had to just use your tripod and whatever, or Zoom at that time as well. But yeah, hopefully there has been definitely an evolution, but it definitely, the parallel, like you say, of the guests, like Rosanna and Bianca are equally as prominent in those worlds, and they both have done crazy things, and I hope that's been the one thing that's been really consistent, is like the quality of our guest.
And I think that, we're typically the most critical of our own work, so we don't get to really be a good judge. You can just like listen back at something old, whether it's music or podcasts, and be like, oh my God, I've grown so much. Like, you notice all the like micro things that the listener who is interacting is like, wow, this is great. What do you mean? Like, what? No, I didn't notice that stutter. I didn't notice this or that. And so, from outside looking in, I enjoyed both episodes and conversations equally and took away different things from them. You just made mention of how, Formula One, racing, these are all male dominated fields. I don't know if you've seen this like recent TikTok trend that's like women in male fields.
No, I haven't. No.
It's been super hilarious. No, I'll definitely send it to you. And there's a lot of like more jokey versions of it that are just like things guys say and whatever not. But racing is certainly, and motorsports is something that has been a very male dominated field. In the brief interaction that we had, well, not so brief, it went on and on because it was so much fun. But yeah, in the conversation that we had the day that we met, you made mention of the fact that it's still going to be quite a long time before we have a woman being a racer in Formula One. I mean, this is a very elite field in the sense that very few people make it to that level of racing in general. I believe something like 800 people in total have become F1 racers, yes? So it's a very exclusive club of individuals who perform at this high level. How long do you think that's going to be, and what are the reasons that it's going to be quite a while still?
So there are females who race in Formula One, let's say behind the scenes, so test drivers. But there is not a female who is actually represented by a team on the grid with those 10 teams, right?
I see.
And that's the problem, because that's obviously what the world sees. They don't see the fact that there are some test drivers who are, I mean, they do, but not really. Like, the people who are like fanatics and into F1 and the F1 geeks might know that, but not the general public as much. So, but it's good that there are test drivers, because that's obviously the stepping stone. But, you could look at Susie Wolff, who's Toto Wolff's wife, the team principal of Mercedes, and she was the closest person to get to a seat, and she was a test driver for Williams F1 at the time. And you think about what would that have meant had she become the driver for their team, and because she left after a few years. And I think, and I can't speak for her, but from the outside looking in, one could maybe think that, at that time Williams was at the back of the pack. So the first female who's going to drive for a team is going to go against the most intense media scrutiny, and it's really not going to help if that team is already on the back foot. They are already dead. They were like coming last. So you can imagine all the onslaught that would come. So it needs to come, the types of, the women need to be in good teams. They shouldn't just be in the teams that are not winning, like at least mid-pack, right? And if anything, there should be, of course, a quote that I think the team should have one female, one male. Like, that would be amazing to equalize the sport, but that's clearly not going to happen for who knows, and if it would happen. But your question was why Why is it? Is that was part of your second question?
Yeah, why is it going to take quite a while before we get to that point?
Yeah, because there's so many factors at play here. So from when you look at it from a bird's eye view, yes, it's an incredibly elitist sport. One season in karting, when you start getting to being professional, is like £100,000, which I don't know how much that is in rands, but let's say that's about.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's like 2.3 million rand if we just times it by 23.
Okay, fine. Yeah, exactly. So 2.3 million rand, you're 4 years old. That's how much your parents have to put in year one, you know, and you know, at 4 years old, do you know that this is going to be your career? Do you know, what is your exposure at that age to what things are you being exposed to? Have you been exposed to motorsport? Most people are not exposed to motorsport. It's not like picking a football up and going to the park. Like anybody can do that, you know. You can't just go for go-karting. Like it takes, you know, you need money to go, right? Even if it wasn't the 2.3 million rand, just the concept of a fan just going to a track and doing a karting session is, again, I don't know how much it is here, but in the UK it's like minimum 30 to 40 pounds, so you know, almost 70 to 80 dollars, right? So it's just not, it's not accessible, like on a price point, you know, because the fuel costs so much, the chassis costs so much, you know, the team costs so much, so all these things, right? And then obviously once you start getting to a professional level, there's a totally different, it's not like that these teams are making loads of money. It's because it costs that much money, like
yes.
You know, to run
the upkeep of it is a lot. There's a lot of overheads. There's a lot of like complicated technology that backs up the sport. Like you said, it's not like the convenience of football,
exactly,
where, you know, a field, a dream, a ball, some friends, and you can still go really far as a beginner.
Exactly. So you've got the first, you know, deterrent, which is the price. So, and that, not that there's an inequality between men and women when it comes to pricing. That is just a matter of chance, what family you're born into. But then secondly, yes, of course, like culturally, you think about then when you are that young, it's just it's almost a stereotype. Like, you know, the guys are going to play football and the girls are going to play with Barbie. And obviously things are very much changing now. But if that has been your exposure, you know, you've got to somehow have had an exposure to motorsport or some contact point to really go out there and do that. So anyway, when you go-karting, you kind of see it for yourself, like 20 people on a track, probably 2 or 3 are female. You know, this is just a general spectator, like, you know, then you look at obviously the championships, and it is about that number, like, maybe 5, you know, out of the 20. And then you look at, and go-karting is just a stepping stone. I mean, you do that for 5-10 years. Then you go into a single-seater, and that's when the costs become even more. Then it's like $1 million, half a million euros a season.
Wow.
So again, you know, the investment, the cost, and the sponsors are only coming, because also what you have to remember is that each car drives really differently. So you need to commit yourself with your own money to a season to learn the car. And only until you start to learn the car do you start to then perform and get results on track and maybe start attracting the attention of a sponsor. So there's all these like different things that are going on, and it's just unfortunate because if there are only 5 out of 10 or at Formula 3 level maybe two out of 20, out of which only one of those people or 2 of those people are going to go to the next stage, the pool is just not there, the talent pool, and now the disparity gap is so large that there's not enough women who are at that level to be at F1 at this point. To make it completely 50-50 equal. But obviously the steps being taken are, yes, many initiatives by the sport, now F1 Academy, there was W Series before, there's a lot more, it's being talked about a lot more in the media, like the world is ready and want to see the women in the top in the sport, and hopefully it will be in the next less than a decade. I really hope so.
And I think that as, like, you know, the audience size grows in general, you have more women who are invested as the audience, and that itself also brings more people into the world of, oh, maybe I can become this, or maybe even if it's too late for you, you know, you can provide that opportunity for the next generation, or, you know, the younger girls in your family, whatever the case may be. We're noticing it with football, right? You know, there's far more eyes on it, even just between this past World Cup and the last Women's World Cup. It's growing. It's all of these sports have grown so much, even just during the course of our lives. And the bigger they get, the more incentive there is and money behind televising them and giving them a bigger platform to exist. But I think it's also really important, the answer that you gave gives a lot more insight into the reasons for why it's not as simple as just making it happen overnight, or that, you know, it's just a matter of, you know, inequality or inequity and we can, or it's, I think the thing is, before you know what the exact reasons are, what the factors are that lead us to have only men on the grid performing every weekend when we watch, it seems like, okay, maybe women are being excluded. We don't know what the reasons are, right? So I think that you shed a lot of light on why this takes a while, but it is already happening. And we can't wait for, you know, a deserving woman, because we know that they want it to be out of merit, that they compete with their equals and represent a good side.
Exactly. And you raised also a very good point about the fact that the viewership of F1, it is actually almost, it's like almost 50-50 of females who are into motorsport, you know, equally as passionate as the male or non-binary, you know, Formula One fans. And obviously the Drive to Survive was a huge catalyst of growth for the sport. And again, you look at Susie Wolff, because yes, she decided to leave Williams, but she didn't then just exit the career. She was like, whatever she must have seen, whatever she must have experienced there, you know, she then decided to go and set up Dare to Be Different, which later got acquired by the FIA and is now known as Girls on Track. But what she did for the sport again was incredible, because that whole initiative is around going into schools, and because how do you make change is always through the grassroots, like in terms of these careers that take, you know, decades to develop and get into, and so she would go to a lot of these schools, and they would put on a day where they would get the top talent of females working in Formula One. People like Rosanna, who have a presenter role, people like Christiana Pace, who has a more engineering role, and a lot, and then another person who will be like a leading medical doctor, somebody from the marketing team, somebody who designed Hamilton's steering wheel. And when these kids see, and then it's like obviously a whole day where it's they get to experience all those different things. So some of them, you know, get to go with Rosanna and pretend like they're being interviewed as they were F1 drivers. And these kids are like really young, and the boys in the school are not allowed to actually do that day. So it's kind of funny, but it's really cool, because it shows to the girls that, you know, it's not only about being a driver. There's also many paths within the sport itself to have a career in. And I think that's really, really powerful. And I think we've lost, like, it's probably more than 500,000 people that have experienced her impact.
That is so wonderful. You just never know. It's like that old argument of, because of class difference, we don't know how much talent is being wasted around the world on people who could be coming up with the most, you know, groundbreaking innovations, cures for diseases, whatever the case may be. And access is the first thing, and seeing what's possible. I mean, from those F1 fans that are watching, people want to be represented. And increasingly, you know, it's going to inspire them to, like, look out for it more. And inevitably these things happen. And can't wait to witness it in our lifetime. It's going to be wonderful. What was your experience like racing? This is something that you got to experience, and you just spoke about the complications of even getting to the point where you get to have this experience. So I'm sure you never took it for granted. What does it feel like?
Yeah, it is definitely an out of mind body experience. The level of concentration and focus that automatically switches into gear because your life could be on the line. Like, it's a dangerous sport, obviously. Even if it might not be your whole entire life, the accidents can happen, and that's something you have to be consciously, like, a bit aware of, obviously, because that guides as well, like, your appetite for risk when it comes. It's such an aggressive sport, like, really, it's so aggressive, like, and you really see it in karting, because it's ruthless, like. People, you know, you're wearing rib cage protectors, like it's very, very intense. So you see a lot of aggression in a way, and it's an interesting outlet to maybe release things. But it feels incredible, and it is about, it's like when you hit the corner in the right way and you've got the car under your control and everything's perfect, like it's beautiful, and overtaking someone and doing it strategically, and because there's a lot. It's not, it's not, yeah. There's so much that you have to think about to make the moves, and it's like you're driving the rhythm with the track, right? That's what you want to get into flow state, and that is what it's like when you perform music, you're in a flow state, and that is something
Certainly.
you just cannot explain until you have been inside it and you've done it, and but like music as well, as I'm sure you'll resonate with, the actual driving and the actual performing is probably 10 to 15, maybe 20% of the job. The rest is all the prep, all the other stuff that's going on,
Totally.
So it's not like you're driving every day and you're getting to, or you're performing every day. Do you know what I mean?
I imagine it's also like, when you're prepping for a set, like in your case, obviously DJ sets are far longer than, a performance set. But let's just imagine you have half an hour and you're like, I'm going to fill this half an hour. Like come the moment that you're actually performing, that half an hour flies away. I don't know if this is something that you experience with racing as well, where it is 2 hours of like razor sharp focus, but does it feel like 2 hours when you're actually in it?
Yeah, no, it does. It actually feels longer than that, and 2 hours is long. 2 hours is Formula One level. Like, but most people are not doing 2 hours. I mean, so it does feel long because your body feels it, and I think that's where you start to feel have you ever been go-karting?
Yes.
Okay, nice.
Love it.
Nice. We must go next time I'm here. So if you have like a powerful car already, 20 minutes in, your hands start to feel a bit like,
oh, totally,
like a bit numb.
Maintaining that grip on like the wheel, and like you don't want to slow it down, and just like totally.
Sometimes you want to take your hand off the wheel for a second just to stretch, that's just a go-karting wheel. Can you imagine what a Formula One wheel with 1,000 horsepower feels like? It's nuts. Like the strength level is crazy. So it is, it does. I mean, different drivers will answer differently, but to me it does feel like it does. Time is actually like magnified and slowed down. Like the beginning is always really like adrenaline, because that's like the start of the race. Like the start always obviously determines the rest of the flow for the race. But yeah, and it depends on the weather conditions as well. The weather really plays a huge factor into it, and that's why Britain has so many great drivers, because we have extreme weather conditions, from rain, snow, sunshine, and and racing in the rain or in the snow is brutal.
Very different techniques required also. It's like if you're only used to like racing in the sun then and dry conditions, then
happy days.
happy days. Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. I imagine you need to it's driving sounds like it's at that level about such a delicate balance, like a perfect Goldilocks zone of just the right amounts of pressure with the overtaking of another car, going around the bend. All of these things are just the right amount of everything. Going a little bit over, a little bit under changes how everything is ends up being executed, right?
And you have to give it that perfect delicacy, which not many drivers can do. Is also taming your mind and the aggression, because it is aggressive, because you are being aggressive. Like you're pushing yourself to the limit, you're pushing your car to the limit. So the natural, and there's so much adrenaline. So, but then to be like Roger Federer when he plays tennis, to be that elegant and graceful, but yet a beast, that is...
Make it look easy, make it look effortless and smooth.
Exactly.
Yeah. You spoke about focus, and I think that this is probably one of the most important topics in our generation, as we have increasingly been brought into times that are just unprecedented in terms of distractions. Razor sharp focus is a rare commodity that becomes harder and harder to attain, and we look at the next generations and the kids who are growing up now, who are brought into this technology that we still got integrated into it at some age, but we have that iPad kid generation, as it's called, and racing is something that absolutely demands and needs focus. How has this focus translated in your life, coming from that background at young age, but also having social media and all the other distractions that we all face? How has it shaped your journey?
Yeah, I'm really grateful for it, because every racer has a different journey with their sport, and every racer, no matter whether they come from a wealthy family or not, will struggle, because it's always, because there's only 800 drivers that ever lived who can say they were in F1. So it doesn't matter how much money you have, what family. I mean, it does matter. Those things matter, of course, because they allow you to get into the gates. But the end of the day, you cannot hide or mask your performance on track by the amount of money you have. That is your own discipline and your own training and your own commitment to being the best that you can be, right? And that's why the ethos and mission of Regents Racing is like, how can motorsport impact leadership? Because whether you care about cars or not, you can learn a hell of a lot from the sport in terms of how do they train. How did Michael Schumacher, what if you could spend a day with his peak performance coach, what could that do to your life, right? And these are some of the people we're fortunate to work with in the club. But I think it's been great because also we may not have touched on it yet, and I don't know if you will or you won't, but you know, I have dyspraxia, which is a motor coordination delay, and I was diagnosed with that at 15 when I was already very well into my passion of music and motorsport. And that's the biggest curveball, because then it's like, yeah, you know, there's actually also something else that you really need to think about in terms of can you actually be a DJ? Can you actually, you know, do all this stuff? Because they require exceptional coordination skills. And I don't know if we may have talked about this or not when we met, but Ayrton Senna had a motor coordination delay, and it's in his autobiography. And when you think that somebody like Senna, the greatest driver that ever lived, had a motor coordination delay, but his family found out when he was really young. So, you know, your brain is formed by the age of 6, 90% of it. So if you can have that ability to retrain your brain from such a young age, obviously it's going to impact the rest of your life in a huge way. But I found out quite late, right? So yeah, it meant, again, you know, learning how to focus more and doing 10,000 hours isn't enough. You need to do more than 10,000 hours, because to overcome some of this stuff and to be able to succeed, you need to do repetitive practice. So I think, you know, the mindset, and that's what fascinates me the most, is this mindset of an athlete. Sure, I'm never going to make it into F1. The time is well come and gone many years ago. But the what I take away from that sport is definitely, yeah, the training like a champion. And DJs face so many similar, which a lot of people don't realize, but there's a lot of commonalities when it comes to things. For example, you cannot choose when you're going to perform and how you're going to feel, right? Like, your set time is at 2 a.m. You need to be switched on in your, you know, you need to give the best show of your life. Doesn't matter if you haven't slept. Doesn't matter if you haven't eaten. Doesn't matter if you're having a fight with your boyfriend or your or your friends. Like, you get on that stage and you perform. Same as F1. The race is at 2 p.m. on a Sunday. It's not going to wait. Time and tide's not going to wait for anyone. You got to go out there and perform for your team. So there's an ability to be able to immediately perform at your peak, like at the click of a button, right? Despite whatever's going on. Then there's the travel. Like, of course, you know, people in Formula One are traveling 22 races in a year. That's 22 weekends away from home, probably more than 22 weekends if you think about just the logistics. DJs are also on the road all the time, right? Then it comes down to nutrition. And so you see, like, you look at some artists who, or maybe you look at it from the outside in and you see this really hedonistic lifestyle, because that is what's associated with electronic music. But you don't realize that if you want to succeed, you need to think like an athlete. Like, you need to be like an athlete. You need to be going to the gym. You need to be stretching, meditating, like preparing your mind to perform and body to perform at that level. And I think so that's what's, you know, definitely the racing is always inspiring me on that focus level. And I think that, yes, to touch on your point, we live in this very distracted digital world, and I'm no saint. Of course, you know, I enjoy like catching up on my device. I'm a gamer, you know, I love gaming. But all in, yeah, you just gotta just be mindful about it. And I think my biggest gripe, unfortunately, is like, as many artists would share, is like, yeah, keeping up with social media, because I hate it. It's like, I enjoy sharing my story. I love where I am and I love capturing where I am, but I hate having to be the person who has to do the edit and do the like just get it all. Do you know what I mean? That's like super stressful.
There's a lot of hats that we have to wear as artists, and it's multiplied by the fact that you're such a go-getter in so many different fields as well. I mean, the podcasting, the editing, you're a journalist, you are the curator for IMS, and you're a performer. And so all of these require a lot of different types of preparation as well.
Very true.
And you touch on two things that I want to bring out. First is, you know, the aspect of being on being on the road a lot, you travel a lot for your work, much like the F1 teams that are, out and about, and having to go from one continent to another on a weekly basis and still perform at their best. How do you stay grounded in, especially being in an industry where you're surrounded by party goers and people who are on vacation, people who are there to have a great time? How do you manage that?
Yeah, I think, I'm very lucky again to have a great network, which I've, as I said, worked very hard to cultivate, and it's a very global network. And I think I'm very passionate about knowing who my music touches. So in a way, I'm quite fortunate that majority of the time when I travel somewhere, I know the pocket of electronic music community, whether that's the people fellow artists, emerging artists, people in the music industry, and then also people on the other side of the booth who are the audience and the dancing. So in a way, I'm just I'm quite adamant on always surrounding myself with my tribe, because that is what helps you stay you feel safe. You see this country in the perspective of a local, which is the best lens. And that's it, and I don't think it's the party goers that are if you think about what are the stresses, it's not really the people who are, that's amazing. That's the energy. That's the give. That's when you see how your music impacts people. It's more to be honest, behind the scenes, dealing with the industry. That's the resilience that you need to somehow cultivate in your mind, because on the other side, yes, you could look at artists who get enormous success and then how does that change them.
Sure.
But I guess also because I don't know, I've been through a lot in my life, and I've studied a lot about narcissism as well, and I'm acutely aware that that 1 in 6 people in the world apparently are narcissists, which is extraordinary.
That is a hell of a lot of people.
And that statistic is probably even higher. But but you don't go to a doctor and say, I think I'm a narcissist. Do you know what I mean? It's not something you go to a doctor. A lot of people don't realize that they are one, and the implications that has on society as a whole and our world, and obviously certain industries attract it more because narcissists are they feed on success, they feed on that whatever gives them that sense of superiority and all these things. And I don't know, I've gone through a lot in experiencing the toxicities around the industry, and it always reminds me that I never want to be that person, never. No thanks. And again, we're so lucky to be able to choose who we work with, because just because an artist might be top 10 in the world, if that person is an arrogant person, I don't care. I don't need that in my life. It's just too stressful. Why would I want that energy? Because it contaminates the energy field that you're keeping so pure. Really, and I don't need that contamination in my life. So yes, sometimes you have to deal and have to work with people who might have a difficult personality side, but you have to also learn to be play the game and be diplomatic.
On both sides, boundaries are important.
Yeah,
both
exactly.
Maintaining them and enforcing them.
Yes, exactly.
It ends up being what protects, your energy, your your energy is the most precious thing there.
Yes. Exactly.
And the thing that you don't want to compromise. And I think the point you made about narcissism made me think about, the brief bit of research that I did on it, and discovered that there's even 2 types of narcissism. I think that's also one of those things.
There's more than 2.
Oh, really?
There's dark empath narcissism, which is when somebody masks themselves as an empath, which is really scary, because somebody could be so nice and you're like,
oh my
wow,
God,
that person's so kind. We'll talk about it later, but there's actually multiple, way more than 2. But yes.
We are so exposed to the grandiose narcissist that if we are lucky enough, we can tell that. But, the opposite side of that is the insecure narcissist, and how much harder that is to feel, because you're oh, well, this person, it doesn't seem all that confident, and they don't seem to be a big fan of themselves. But, a lot of people gain a lot of power through, pushing other people down and making you feel insecure and undervalued. And like you said, some industries, entertainment especially, draws a lot of this in. And I think this is where sports is, if you have good sportsmanship and you have the discipline of an athlete, these things are what protect you. Like you said, the ability to, discipline is there so that you can have a bit of control over yourself. You can't control the world. You can control some aspects of your own experience, and that can be your safety, and that can be the thing that makes you also notice energy that's not at all in alignment with that. And so these things are the protective mechanisms. And I think a big part of why the good sport as as a quality, like this adjective really appealed to me. And like, I think we all view it differently and connect with it differently. I'm sure we have definitely different people come up in our minds when you think of a good sport, but it's a quality that I think we should all aspire to. And hence I wanted to, kind of interrogate, what are these qualities? What does it mean to be one? And that is relational. It means you also know what isn't good for you. And the entertainment industry, whether it's being a DJ or performer, and there's a lot of glitz and glam that lure you in. And we see that if that is what you really want to get out of it, there's a lot of dark places and dark corners that may lead you.
Absolutely. And like, I will say as well, because it is a very hedonistic environment, it is designed to be so hedonistic. It's actually, how hedonistic can it be? Like, what's the sign of a good party, right? And I think you just have to think as well the deeper implications of this. Like, how many people lost their lives for those drugs that people are taking today, like from human trafficking, and not just thinking about yourself in the moment of like, it's my own selfish pursuit of pleasure. Like, actually, what is the deeper implications for the world as a whole, for this culture of excess, Yeah, I don't know, but you said it really well. So yeah.
And like, also the party goer may be on vacation, you are at work, and there's a certain degree of professionalism that, like, this is your career, and the habit, like, if you get too used to that shot of tequila as just a random example, but that's like the coffee for your work now. Exactly. And it's like, cool, are you gonna be able to perform without it? And you don't realize the habits that you're forming. And I think that's where our habits really, how you do anything is how you do everything, right? Exactly. And that brings me to something I wanted you to talk about. Hashtag don't crack under pressure.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yes. What do you want me to touch upon in terms of that?
What comes to mind when you think of it? Can you explain how that hashtag became relevant in your life, and in what moments it came?
Yeah, sure. So there was this TED Talk opportunity. And I had only 6 weeks notice for this TED Talk. I was invited to do it, and so I hadn't. The way TED Talks normally work is that you pitch an idea that's worth spreading, and it's literally a 1-sentence thing, right? It's like your pitch. So I hadn't done that, right? So the TED organizers approached me, and they were like, they wanted me to do a talk, but they didn't. They gave me total free reign on what it was going to be, right? So I was like, okay, this is crazy. What am I going to talk about? And obviously in your TED Talk, you want to talk about so much, you want to somehow share your life story, but it has to have obviously it has to be a golden idea worth spreading, right? So, and there's so much you want to say. So it was very stressful, because also in those 6 weeks, I was in 6 countries, literally America, Africa, Ibiza at some point, like lots of places. And I was putting on a huge event for the Regents Racing. So there's just so much going on. So it wasn't like I had like this at least 6 weeks to think about what it was. And also, just to add, like side note, when you do get asked to do a TED Talk, lots of people get speaking coaches. Some people prepare for like a year. I think they say that for every minute of a TED Talk, that person has practiced that minute for a whole hour. So if a TED Talk is 18 to 20 minutes, they have rehearsed that in front of their person, or just in front of the mirror for 20 hours, right? I did not have that luxury of time. So I was in Dubai for 48 hours. I was on the racetrack, and and then I was on the plane on the way back, and I was like really trying to think about this TED Talk. And I saw this picture of me with this helmet, and behind the helmet, or in this car, and then behind the car there was this advert by banner by Tagore, the watch company, and it said don't crack under pressure. And I think that when I saw that picture, it kind of like, I suddenly had like this lightning bolt moment at like 30,000 feet in the air, because I'd realized that like after I got diagnosed with dyspraxia, it wasn't like, maybe today's world where there'd be a lot more help and guidance around what that meant. I was just given this diagnosis, and then it was really more to get extra time for exams by my teachers. So the educational psychologist actually, discovered something was wrong with me. But it was like the fix was like, you get extra time in your exams. There was no actual, like, what does this mean for you as a person, your energy, taming your mind, like lots of
Thinking differently.
thinking really differently, right? Like, and what does that mean in society? And people who have learning differences, because they are kind of different, they think differently. Like some of them do get bullied a lot more in school because they just are the different ones. And anyway, so lots of different things going on here. But when I saw that picture, I remember I was just thinking, yeah, I got that diagnosis. We never really talked about it afterwards. And I just kind of was like, I had this fearless determination that I really don't care. Like, I'm going to go out there and still race and still do music. I just like, it's going to be my way. I'm like, I will create my own lane to succeed, like on my highway of life. Like, that is what I will do. Right. And so I did that over 10 years. And then, and I never told anybody that was around me that I had dyspraxia, because there was an imposter syndrome, because I thought if people knew I had it, they would think I'm like a con artist or something like that. How on earth could you be doing these two things which require exceptional coordination? And then, do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So I just didn't tell anybody. And and then I looked at the thing and the picture, and I was like, wow, actually, I've now achieved a lot, and I can turn around and say, like, actually, I do have this thing, but it doesn't mean that defines your limits. And in fact, you can actually surpass them and blow them out the water. And I only found out about Ayrton Senna having motor coordination delay in the last 3 years. So to find that out was like, wow, yeah, there's no limitations that you can put on yourself. You know, you see people racing who don't have legs. They're Billy Monger, for example, and there is a way. I mean, Lewis Hamilton's brother, he has cerebral palsy. I mean, you know, there are ways to do what you believe you are born here to do in this earth and want to do.
I think that's such a powerful message and so important for people. Again, it goes back to like seeing what is possible. I mean, in your case, you didn't have Ayrton to look at when you really were discovering and getting this diagnosis. You had to do everything the hard way without the infrastructure of, okay, what does this mean for how I learn things? How can I manage to turn, you know, my weaknesses into my strengths, which is something you spoke about in your TED Talk as well. And it's so empowering and inspiring when you see someone who has a challenge like you, turn that into their strength, and turn that in that obstacle is also the same gift that will actually set you apart from others. And the implication of what you're saying is that when there's a will, there's a way.
Absolutely. And also, if you look at pressure comes in many forms. So pressure is your own internal, you know, we all have probably insecurities. We all have self-doubts. We all have these things. These are our own self-imposed pressures. But then you have society and the pressures that society puts you in. And then you have industry pressures. So there's many things that, you know, and then you look and you said, well, don't crack under pressure, because those are all those are all, you know, they say diamonds are made under the highest amount of pressure. So just think about that, you know.
Yeah. My dance teacher, who, funny enough, I'm so blessed to have met through the podcast. I think I may have brought it up to you when we met, and she said two words that really, for me, capture the essence of what we've spoken about now as well: fall forward. That's the worst that can happen, is that you are still moving forward. It's not going to be perfect. Things are rarely perfect, but you're growing through that. You're growing through pushing through. And you're also building this reputation and this rapport with yourself that you are the kind of person that pushes through, and you're not going to be deterred by the obstacle itself. And in your case, obviously having this diagnosis, it's one of those moments that stresses you out. And very clearly you said, you know, you had concerns about sharing that with your environment. Being in two industries, DJing and racing, both require a lot of hand-eye coordination and just coordination in general. But one of the things that really stood out to me is also the fact that you had to learn how to learn differently.
Yeah, that's true.
What advice would you be able to give to other people who might be struggling with something similar?
On how to learn differently, or just in general?
Either.
First of all, embrace the fact that it can be your superpower. Then really think deeply about what it is you're passionate about, because that is going to then shape how you approach what the implications of having your learning difficulty might mean. Of course, you know, developing the habits of success is really important. Like, and this is universal. It's like, you know, the meditation, the stretching, like just taking care of your mind and body is like the most important thing that you can have. And yeah, I guess, like, I don't know. I mean, learn about it, understand what, don't just think I've got this thing. I might just like for example, you might have dyslexia. I'm bad with words and speech formation. So so I'm never going to be good at English or something. But actually, like, what does that actually mean for many other aspects of your life? And because you'll be surprised at how much of a domino effect it can have. And it may not necessarily be anything to do with the actual, like, it may not even be the English thing that's the biggest impact for you. It might be other things. And that could be your schooling environment. That could be, many things, right? So really taking the time to think about what that means for your life and how you want to move through life, kind of and of course for any parent who's listening to this, as I say, like, yeah, if you do can find out that if something's wrong with your child and you have the chance to help them before the age of 6, it will be the biggest thing that you can do for your child, like 100%. 100%.
Just making them as limitless as possible.
Yeah, but like, for example, if you know that somebody like Eton had a dyspraxia, had a motor coordination delay, they didn't get him that go-kart because he had a motor coordination delay. They got that go-kart because he was obsessed with cars. And they only found out later, very soon in that time frame, that he had this motor coordination delay. But by having something at that age which requires coordination and your brain is developing, you're learning so much. So it's like all those nodes are suddenly coming together really, really quite fast. Like, had he done that 10 years later, it would have been a different story. You know what I mean? So it's just because you're able to retrain and rewire at such a young age. That's why those early formative years are really crucial.
I totally understand. And I think my next question relates to the work that you're doing with Regents Racing. As someone who's been a racer, how has, like, your relationship with racing through time and seeing the importance of time and efficiency through racing impacted the way that you work, especially with dyspraxia being an element of this as well?
Yeah, so I'm quite a perfectionist and I'm very, like, organized. And this is something I had to learn to really cultivate, because getting that sense of order and sequence is quite difficult for people who have sometimes dyspraxia. Not every it's all a spectrum, right? I cannot speak for everybody in this conversation, but it's all a spectrum. So, like, that's the thing. But yeah, because you're learning so much about, like, nano split second precision, like, it makes you that precise about everything. Like, you, for example, with racing, the mindset is you leave no stone unturned. To make the car the best, to make you the best, you leave no stone unturned. And that's the ethos I operate in my work life today, whether it's music, whether it's the company, like anything. It's like, leave no stone unturned. Like, don't take no for an answer. Like, try to figure out if there is a hack around or a way around. And I'm really structured and really disciplined with my time management, like, because you have to be. And also because, like, you're in these industries. I mean, in general, I think you should always be a student of life. But of course, in music, because technology is such a big influence and is changing the landscape so rapidly, you always need to learn. So, you should have that mindset of, like, learning. But then when it comes to learning and you have a learning difficulty, sometimes complex things can be quite hard to understand. And so it's always about it really mastering the foundations of something. Like that, like, always thinking back to what is the foundational essence of this point, right? Like, if it's a very complicated plugin or something, like, the foundations are always going to be like the SDR, like, the attack, the sustain, the decay, the resonance, like what, and or building the nodes of, like, some analog thing. They all have the same core principles. They're just designed differently. Do you know what I mean? So you really have to, like, think, like, not get, it can be overwhelming, but, like, yeah, just taking time to really, like, go deep into it and having patience as well. Like, give yourself patience. Grace. Because you cannot, like, yeah, exactly, grace.
As a recovering perfectionist. Yeah, I think one of my main challenges has been how to overcome decision paralysis, because indecisiveness is something that I've experienced a lot, because, like, that's also part of the maybe like part of the implication of trying to leave no stone unturned, is that you don't know how to prioritize between things and what needs to happen first. And then you're like, what if this is actually equally as important as this? And if you can't differentiate between what's important, like, everything's important, so nothing's important. How do you, I'm sure there's more than one way, but when you encounter blocks in different areas, what are some of the core habits you fall back on to help you navigate through?
take a quick pause. I just want to check this.
No worries.
Okay, so your question was around, what was it again? Decision paralysis, and what was the
how do you work through blocks that are inevitable to occur in different areas of our lives? I think navigating through them is a necessity, right? Don't crack under pressure. Also, you have to move through. The only way out is through. So what are some habits you fall back on
to make decisions?
Yeah.
I will say that, yes, that is an advantage of racing, is that you don't really have time to get stuck in decisions, because you do need to, it's quite reactive. Like, you need to, as in, like, you're on the track, you're always reacting to every single microcosm of anything going on. But obviously, of course, that's on the track, but also outside of it, yes, it's a lot of strategy. But in general, it's like, and also music, it's quite fast paced. So like the ability to make decisions quick is like a good thing.
DJing especially.
But equally, I think it's like, there are, of course, moments where there are going to be bigger, like, I don't know, other decisions that just take time. And, without going into it, I do know that outside of the business world, that there was a decision that took me far too long in my life and I got paralyzed to make that decision. And, and so the advice I would give to make to do these things is like, first of all, nature is so important. And I think you guys are so lucky. You live in South Africa. You have this, you have the extraordinary nature around you. I'm also very lucky because I live in a place in London, which has the nature. But I think about, these cities where there's just like, they can't just go for a walk in some really inspiring place. But anyway, the point is go out and get fresh air, because that's really important. Sometimes it could just be even like a decision, like music is maybe something, making music is something where you see a lot of sometimes decision paralysis, because like, when you're in flow state, because it's coming together like magnets. But then there are sometimes things that you get stuck in decision making when you're like producing music, like, oh, this is not the right hi-hat, or this, especially the synth or something, like the creative melody is not the right thing, and you just can't get there, and like you're just getting stuck. So sometimes just taking a moment away is like super important. Resetting. Then other things to make good decisions is your power of intuition is like the most important, powerful. Cannot ignore it at all. Your gut is like the most important thing. Like it just knows like intuitively what's right for you. And then sometimes, like if it really is like a big thing to decide, like sometimes, just actually doing the exercises of like, SWOT analysis, or like, these kind of like just writing it down, and the pros and cons, and the thinking about like your career as a chessboard, like the pieces you need to do to navigate and be really strategic, and always be 2 steps, 3 steps ahead, 3 moves ahead, actually, because then people, they're gonna be surprised. I
think that's great advice. First, nature. If you have access to it, clear your mind. They say like going on walks is one of the most like common things that extremely successful people cite as a place where they get a lot of their good ideas.
Exactly.
And an unbusy and uncluttered mind is the source of a lot of good ideas. And so doing whatever brings you that kind of peace and that kind of space. If you can't seek outside, find a park to walk in, take your dog for a walk, whatever the case may be. That's one. 2, try to think about it and be analyzed if you can. If it's something that like analysis will help, give that a go. 3, walk away from it and come back. Like sometimes that is what it takes, depending on whether it's an artistic decision, a personal, emotional, spiritual one. Sleep on it. That's sometimes the thing that you need. A tired mind may be like the worst state to be making that kind of decision. I think as long as you're doing something and not feeling like you're giving up, like trusting that you and your intuition as 4, and probably the most important. But something that I found with intuition is that a few years ago, like I didn't feel like I had as good of a rapport with myself, whether it be through discipline, whether it be through just really feeling I'm making good decisions or trusting my own judgment. And so one thing that I will say about intuition and that gut feeling is that at the time it used to really confuse me. Like, what does my gut say? I felt a lot more insecure. And so I felt like that was also my gut, telling me. And you're like, wait, is my gut, like, what is my gut saying? And because people say trust your gut, you're like, but my gut is telling me I should be jealous, for example. And so something that I will say on that is that it's also a rapport and something that you really cultivate with yourself to the point where you really can rely on your energy to tell you, something about this environment doesn't make me feel safe. Something isn't clicking. I'm a little bit more short today, whatever the case may be. And it's a beautiful thing to go on that journey with yourself. And there's plenty of ways that you've already suggested we can cultivate that. Meditation, yoga, these are all mind-body connections that it can be a sport for someone, it can be golf, it can be whatever, but building that rapport with yourself is what will strengthen your gut intuition if you don't feel like you have that ability to conjure up and use that whenever you need.
But also just connection to earth is the number one simple and most effective way to get grounded.
Touch grass.
Yeah, exactly.
As I imagine, you know that you will know that there's been quite a lot of talk and hype about the return of Formula One to South Africa, to Joburg and the Kyalami Grand Prix. With Lewis Hamilton in particular being one of the more vocal, voices about bringing it back here. What are your projections? Do you have any? What do you feel?
Yeah, I'm dying for it to be in South Africa. It's unbelievable that there's no F1 in Africa, and I find it quite sad because they're adding a lot of races. What is it? Miami, Las Vegas, Austin. I think that there might be another one coming into the States, and it's just I just find that a bit unfair because we should be looking at other continents that do not. I mean, how can a whole continent not have a race? Like, to me, that is mind-boggling. And yes, I do know that I think Kyalami recently got approved some sort of F1 status again because the track needed to obviously go through many changes to become F1 compliant and technical spec. So maybe that must be a step in the right direction. I think the what they say is that obviously Hamilton really does not want to retire until he gets to race in Africa in F1, and I think it would be heartbreaking if he didn't, because I reckon it's probably going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years maximum, hopefully within the next 5 years, but you never know with these things. So yeah, I really hope he can exert and make that happen somehow, because it's obviously not on him, but it's like
certainly.
Yeah, he's got a lot of he's trying his best to make it happen, let's say,
and it's beautiful, like from us who are based here and really want to see it return. It's lovely to have a voice as prominent and as iconic as Lewis Hamilton.
Yes,
doing the bidding for it,
for sure. But equally, we also have to think as well, because we've seen a lot of new tracks come into the play recently, like Saudi and and I think that we can learn from a lot of how these new tracks approached things, and I think it's also on the South African people and the country and the organisers to be as efficient and as organised as possible for this racetrack to take a whole F1, because it's no joke. It's like
absolutely,
it's a huge logistical operation, and you do see it and feel those cracks when you go to tracks that are newer. So that needs to be airtight, and I think
systems can't be offline.
No,
I don't know if you've heard this expression yet.
Course,
so yeah, it's exciting times, and I'm sure it would give you more reason to come back here.
The first one is coming back. I'm already coming back anyway. Loads
no, we have to go karting as well.
We must.
Yeah, so it's a very exciting time, I think, now to be having this conversation and seeing what happens hopefully over the next 2 years with the sport. We're nearing the end of the year and the beginning of this new chapter and new year. The number 9 is the sum of what 2025 will be. Okay. And I've seen that you've made reference to the energy of a number that represents the year. What do you think we can hope finds us in 2025?
Yeah, it's a great question. As always, compassion, that's like the number one thing. I think we're always in this ridiculously fragmented and violent world, and it's just continuous and it never stops. But if we don't continuously carry that compassion, then it's just too easy to get we probably would never be in that situation of violence, in terms of wanting that violence, but there are really weird messed up people in the world who are psychotic, and and we must fight against that oppression and that call out the inequality as it's happening. And obviously what's happening in Gaza right now is just heartbreaking and just ridiculous, and how Benjamin Netanyahu is allowed to commit just genocide at this scale is unbelievable. So, I cannot enter next year without thinking about where is the world at large and what can we hope and wish for the planet as a whole, for humanity as a whole. And then I think, 25 is quite a powerful number. So it feels like a power of like making things happen, really. That's what it feels like to me anyway, going into 2025.
I love that. That's such a beautiful energy to end 2024 and begin 2025. To close off, I wanted to ask you, this is going to be a segment that we start with you. Sure. What is the best advice you have ever received?
From my mum. If at first you don't succeed, just try again. There's not one way to do something. So it's very easy to just like call defeat when you fail, but like actually get up and get back in the ring and just find another way to do something because sometimes you don't want to do something, but you have to do it anyway. So you've got to figure it out, And
have grace.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Farah. It was such a pleasure chatting to you and having an extended version of the conversation that we had.
True.
To welcome a fellow podcaster, a good sport now. I hope you tell people what you got going on, where they can find Mission Makers and everything that you're up to. And the next time they'll see us go-karting.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks so much. You can follow me, dj.n1nja. That's my main account. And then if you're into racing, Regents Racing, and podcasting, Mission Makers. DJ Ninja is where I keep most of my updates because I cannot keep up with everything, so that's the main one. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it. I'm really glad we made this happen, and you got to take me karting when I come back. So
no, most definitely. Thank you so much for making time and the effort. It was so much fun chatting to you, and I can't wait for people to hear more about the inner workings of motorsport, and check out your podcast if they want to know all the ins and outs.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Please remember to like and subscribe so myself and Aiden work even harder to bring you more good sports and amazing guests.